Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third session on Masters and the Path. We are starting chapter 3 on the pupils. And in this session, we'll be talking about what are the characteristics of the pupils, of the disciples that need to be there for us to be considered worthy of being considered discipleship, for us to be able to move up faster on the spiritual path. Because if you look at ourselves the way we are right now, we are already on the spiritual path and being a part of the spiritual journey. So before we begin today's session, let us begin with an invocation. Please sit straight, keep your spine straight. Take a deep breath. To the Supreme God, Divine Father, Divine Mother, to my spiritual teacher, to all the spiritual teachers, the holy gurus, holy masters, saints, archangels, holy angels, and spiritual helpers, to my higher soul, to my divine self, and to my guardian angels, to the angels of theosophy, to the angels of pranic healing and arhatic yoga, to the angels of love and wisdom. We invoke for your blessings of divine light, divine love, divine power, divine healing, divine guidance, and divine protection. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to be a part of a group, to study, to learn, and to use this knowledge to become a better person and a better soul, to become instruments of service in serving all of humanity and all those we share our space with in this world, physically and energetically. We thank you in full faith. Take a deep breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes with a smile. Atma Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the session. And we are now going to go into the pupils. However, before we start, there was a message we received on personal messages. And I'm going to put this question out there today for the group. And if you could let me know from your insights, from your understanding of the question. And then later we'll answer the question. But of course, we'd love to have this in the chat information. Okay. So the question is, do the adepts, do the masters always take bodies with perfect health? Can they do this work through a body that requires care, special care? And the context for this question is the person who's asked this question has a child with special needs, and they know many, many special children, all with different kinds of ailments, but they all have so much energy, so much magic in them, because their eyes glisten, they have such pure behavior, and their smile lights up the room. And the moment you come and see them, you interact with them, your heart expands, your crown activates, and you also feel divine energy come in. And any parent or any person who has a special needs child, they feel inspired. Yes, there are many ups and downs and challenges, but they, for the most part, feel very inspired to do more good, to do more help, and be of help for the world. So could they also be a form of the great ones to help us evolve? So the question is, do the adepts always use bodies of people with perfect health, and can they do their work through a body that requires special care? This is the question that we will be answering later on, but we would love it if you would share your insights and ideas in the comments below. All right, give a moment for that, and we'll start with the chapter. So now there's always been a great brotherhood of adepts, a group, a union. It's called the Great White Brotherhood. And there have always been those who knew, who possess this inner wisdom about the workings of it and what work they're supposed to do. And it just so happens that the masters, who are referred to in this particular book, they are among the present representatives of this Great Brotherhood on this lineage of seers and sages. But for those who want to know more and who want to go closer to the path is open. But the person who aspires to approach the masters can reach them only by making themselves unselfish, by making themselves the way the masters are, as unselfish as the masters themselves are. They have to learn to forget their personal self, and they have to devote themselves to the service of all of humanity. Part of the knowledge which they have gathered during their countless number of years on Earth is available to everyone on the physical plane under the name of the studies of theosophy. But there is far more. There is far more which is hidden. The Master Kutumi, Master KH himself, he once very smilingly said that when someone spoke of the enormous change that the Theosophical Society has made in their lives, he said, yes, but we've only removed a small, very small corner of the veil. We have removed only a tiny, tiny portion. What we have given, when we have thoroughly assimilated the entire knowledge that the White Brotherhood gives us, we'll be able to lift the veil further. But it's only when we have complied with those conditions, only when we've understood and gone through with understanding all of the teachings which are there. Now, when a person enters the spiritual path, when they're going through, a lot of mistakes are made. A lot of issues, like it's obvious when you join a new system, when you're trying to explore and understand, there are many mistakes which you made. If I take the example of, say, pranic healing, and when I first started pranic healing way back in 2009, there were mistakes which I made in scanning. There were mistakes which I made in healing. Sometimes you had the wrong set of colors. But gradually, with some practice, the situation improved. And then came our Hatha Yoga, where we learned about character building and purifications, all right, or the 5 virtues, and of course, correspondingly, what the vices are. And it just so happened that during learning some of those things, a certain amount of clairvoyance, a certain amount of clairsentience, those special extrasensory powers they developed. And I remember there was this one session which was happening, and I was observing a healing being done. And I remarked, oh, there are elementals in this person's aura. It's around their head, it's around this, around that. And the person doing the healing was my mentor. And she nodded and she continued with the healing. And then the patient left. And then she really, really ripped into me. She said, how dare you disturb the session? I said, I was not disturbing the session. I was helping. I was really helping out. There were things which you missed. I helped them out. She said, yes, but you could have mentioned this by writing a note and giving it to me quietly, instead of declaring it nice and loudly. First of all, you had no business coming into the healing room like that when a healing was ongoing, but yet you did. And that disrupted the flow. And then this person is already in an emotionally vulnerable state, which is why they've come for healing in the first place. And then you've told them this and you've told them that. It made the task that much more difficult. It will make their healing, their recovery, that much slower. So I didn't think of it that way initially. I thought of it that I was helping someone. But when my mentor pointed this out to me, and I realized, oh, I'd actually really goofed up. And I learned to keep my mouth shut, relatively speaking. Some months later, many months later, thankfully, I made a similar kind of mistake. And my mentor, she remembered this, and she said, do you remember the time you made that mistake? Well, you've made a mistake again in the same vein. Now, once you make the mistake, the higher beings will look at you and say, it's okay, they're fresh on the spiritual path. They've made a mistake. The second time you repeat the exact same mistake, they're going to look at you and say, what's up with this person? Do they not learn from their mistakes? Why are they repeating? Okay, we'll give him a chance. We'll give him a chance. But if you repeat the mistake a third time, the same time of mistake, then they're going to say, okay, this person's not ready for the work. And they're just going to withdraw their energies from you. I know I've felt that. I've known what it is like to try to do healings and not feel the energy pass through. I've gone through periods where I felt very disconnected. And if you're into pranic healing or hatha yoga, if you watched the videos of Master Choi in the retreats, you know that there's he demonstrates what it is like for a student or a chela meaning a disciple, learning to be a disciple, when the student is disconnected from the energy of the master. And I've known for a certain amount of time what it feels to be disconnected from the energy of the higher beings, and it's not fun, to put it mildly. So according to the teacher, according to the writings in this book, going back to the topic, much is forgiven during the first years of probation, but no sooner is a student accepted than their personality must disappear and they have to become a force of nature, a mere beneficent force of nature. Because only when the power of all the excessive emotions, the passions, is altogether killed, complete, destroyed, with the power of their will, when all the lust and the longings of the flesh are also removed, that is when their astral body is reduced, as in the astral desires, the tremendous wave of desires, okay? That has gone down, and the union with the higher self can then take place. And when that happens, then we become really fit instruments. We have at our disposal a lot of powers and abilities to be able to do the work. Now, the point of view of the masters is so radically different from ours that it's difficult for us at first to grasp it. Now, because they are masters, they are also from the higher the evolution of the human chain. So they also have their private affections and likes, just like we do. And of course, they like some people more than they like other people, but they'll never allow such feelings to influence their attitudes when the work is in question. They'll take care of a person, they'll spend a lot of time and energy on a person if they see in him the seeds of future greatness. If they think that this person will prove to be a good investment for the amount of time and force spent upon him. But there's no such possibility, such as favoritism, in the minds of the great ones. They consider simply and solely the work which has to be done, the work of evolution, and the value of the human being, the person, in relation to that work of evolution. And if we ourselves will make ourselves fit to take part of that, to take a part in that, that's when our progress will be rapid. And so if I go back again to the personal story of not learning my lesson or goofing up more than once and feeling disconnected for some time, and then through purification, through many tests and trials, service, coming back onto the path, and then now here having an opportunity to be of service again in whatever little way possible, is to try to be fit and be a part of the great work that needs to be done. Because arguably there's a lot of work to be done, and we can all listen to theory, we can all show up for study sessions, but there has to be a transference of that skill set onto the session, onto real life. Like, okay, we know about emotions, we know about thoughts. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Just go back to a normal life, eat, sleep, drink, party, work, and show for the next session again. Or we take that knowledge, meditate upon it, and use that information, use that knowledge to become better persons, a better person and a better soul, which is what we kind of invoke for every time we start our sessions. And because this work is so large, very few people realize the magnitude of this undertaking, and therefore the seriousness of what they're asking when they want to be used as pupils, to be taken as students. The adepts are dealing with this entire world with enormous sweeps of power. Because the adepts, they're influencing millions and millions of people, well, at this point, billions of people, in their causal bodies. So what are the causal bodies? If you look at the diagram here on the right, if you think of yourself, you see this little spark thingy here in the center? If you think of yourself as your physical body being inside that spark, okay, and everything else around you is that your aura, first what you've got is the gross physical body, okay? That is also called the Annamaya Kosha, Kosha meaning body or sheath or covering. So you have Anna in the Indian language means rice. Maya could of course also mean Maya, but Annamaya Kosha is the body that is sustained through rice, in this case meaning food. Your physical body will die if you do not give it food. Then you've got the Pranamaya Kosha, prana again meaning life, energy. So the energy body, the etheric or the etheric double, it subsists, it sustains itself on that energy. But the physical body and the etheric body together constitute what is called the gross physical body. Beyond that, you have got the astral body, the mental body. So you have different names for it, the Manomaya Kosha, the Vijnanamaya Kosha. And then it comes to the Anandamaya Kosha, Ananda here meaning bliss, because our higher soul is in a state of bliss, happiness. Okay, now I'll diverge a little bit and make a quotation from one of the teachers where he says, and I'm sorry if this offends anybody's sensibilities, apologies in advance, but according to the teacher, ordinary people, the closest they can get to spiritual bliss is an orgasm. For ordinary people, I'm not quoting the exact words, but the essence is that when they experience an orgasm, that is the closest they can get to spiritual bliss. They're blanked out, they're spaced out, they're high. Now imagine living in a state of perpetual bliss at all times because of your connection to your higher soul. Not physical bliss, but spiritual bliss, that state of happiness and ecstasy. So the masters, they are influencing millions and billions of people in their causal bodies on the higher plane, on the Buddhic plane, all the time, steadily, through almost imperceptible degree, raising the higher bodies of the people on a whole scale scale. So the masters, they are influencing, they're sending the energies to us, raising our vibrations. You might have heard this saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, there's also another saying that if you take one step towards the teacher will take 10 steps towards you. You might have heard this saying. And so this is exactly what happens, that when we align ourselves to a spiritual topic, to a spiritual mindset, that yeah, we want to be of service, we want to help, we want to know more and learn more. Maybe we just want to improve our lives and the lives of those around us. The higher beings, they'll be sending all that energy to us 10, 20, 30 times or more. Because it's the same master who'll spend their entire life in doing that work, who'll turn around and pay personal attention to little details connected with one pupil. And my mentor told me this one thing, and I also have experienced this, is that when you devote your life to helping other people, to helping the master's work, at one point the masters will look at you and say, okay, why is this person unable to live up to their full potential? Oh, it's because this person has difficulties in life. They may have some financial difficulties, or one of their family members may be unwell, or something, relationship, health, wealth, whatever. And they'll say, all right, let's make this person's life easier. And they will send energy, they will send blessings, and they'll actually help reduce much of the difficulties. I've experienced this in my personal life, but that's a story for another time. Now, human progress is slow, but it's constant. Therefore, the number of people who can become perfect is increasing, and the possibility of reaching their level is within the reach of all those who are willing to make that effort. In normal times, we would need many births before we could become an adept or an arhat or beyond that. But just now, it's possible for us to really hasten our progress on that path and compress into a few lives the evolution which would otherwise take many thousands of years. And that preparation needs great self-control, determined effort to be put in year after year after year. Sometimes there's very little to show for outward progress because it involves the training of the higher bodies far more than the physical body. And the training of the higher does not always manifest itself very obviously on the physical plane. So you're doing a lot of spiritual practices. Yes, your face will glow, your aura will become more magnetic, and you'll have many beautiful experiences, but it's not necessary that you will feel that you've lost weight, or they've developed six packs, or that you're ready for a modeling career. That's not exactly the effect that's going to happen. The effect will be much more spiritual. You'll notice changes in your life. People will become more loving because they will also be responding to the loving, generous, higher energy that you are radiating outwards. Now, anyone who hears about the masters and their teaching, if they have any idea, any concept of what it means and involves, will be seized with an intense desire, an inner desire to understand more and to enter the service. Because the more he learns, the more he becomes filled with the wonder and beauty of God's work and God's plan, and he becomes anxious to become part of this divine plan. So then he begins to ask himself the question, they begin to ask themselves the question, what must I do next? And the answer is work. Do what you can to help the progress of humanity in the master's way. Begin with what you have the opportunity to do and what you can do. And it may be a little external thing at first, but as you acquire the necessary qualities of character, as you purify your character, you will be drawn into the higher side of it all. Until, through striving to be your best, to do your best, you will find yourself qualified with the energies and qualities which will take you into initiation and membership into the great white brotherhood itself. So basically, do the work, whatever work you can do more of it, purify yourself, and you'll get there. Even though externally it might seem like there's nothing happening, you're working internally. So then the author Bishop Leadbeater, C.W. Leadbeater, he talks about a personal experience that when first I had the privilege of coming into a somewhat closer touch with Master KH in this case, I asked him in a letter what he should do. And Master KH replied, you must find work for yourself. You know what the work it is that we're doing. So throw yourself into our work any way that you can. Now, if I give you a definite piece of work to do, you would do it. But in that case, the karma of what was done would be mine because I told you to do it. You would have the karma of willing obedience, which is good, but it's not the karma of initiating a fruitful line of action. I want you to initiate work for yourself because then the karma of the good deed will come to you. And this is something which I think is very important, that we wait and saying, I'm here to do the work. Tell me what work is to be done. Compared to other people who actually go out there and say, okay, there's suffering happening. We are going to initiate a project. We are going to start something. We're going to do something. And if I may take this opportunity to say here at Prana World, a couple of years back when the pandemic was starting, when the lockdowns were there all over the world, we felt the need, the calling that we should disseminate and simplify some of these more difficult to understand books. And so far, we had almost 13 to 14 study sessions. Every Tuesday, we come up with an esoteric study where there are at least 50 to 100 people joining the sessions. And I'd like to believe that we have taken some steps in initiating projects which help people evolve mentally, spiritually. We also got the prosperity healing program, mass prosperity healings, which happen a couple of times every week, to help people generate more prosperity energy and to have a more comfortable financial side of life. So the crux of the matter here is initiate. Don't sit around and say, hey, if there's anything you need me to do, tell me, I'm here. That's great. That's good. And if you do it, that's fantastic. But as the master says, you would only have the karma of willing obedience. It's good, but it's not the karma of starting a line of action. Initiate work, initiate and do projects for yourself. You know the work that we are doing, because then the karma of the good deed will come to you. Now, we might realize that it's our business not to wait until we're asked to do something, but to set ourselves to work. And there's, in the connection of theosophy, and actually in any spiritual school perhaps, there's quite a good deal of humble work to be done. Perhaps some of us would prefer the more spectacular part. We like to stand up and deliver lectures to a large audience and, tell people this and that. We can generally find people who are willing to offer themselves for that service. But there's a lot of humdrum, boring office work also to be done in connection to spiritual teachings. And we don't always find volunteers for that. So work is to be done. Doesn't matter if it's in the limelight or behind the scenes. Now, the qualifications for admission to the Great White Brotherhood, which have to be acquired in the course of the work, are of very specific, definitive character. And they're always essentially the same, although they have been described in many different terms in the last 2,500 years. So there's a chela. A chela is a person who has offered himself to a master as a pupil to learn practically the hidden mysteries of nature and the psychic powers latent in man. The master who accepts him in India is called a guru, or a dispeller of darkness, and a real guru is always an adept in the occult sciences. Here is a diagram of the causal body of the guru. Pretty large, pretty big, pretty bright. Okay. Now, according to the author, there is a book. I would like to pronounce this as Cutie. I don't know. Book 4 of Cutie. Sounds very sweet. But there's a chapter on the laws of the upasanas. We learn that there are qualifications which are expected in a chela. So you and me, we are supposed to have these qualifications, right? Number 1, perfect physical health. So if you think of the question which was posed to you in the very beginning, and then you get to see a context of this, number 1 is supposed to be perfect physical health. Second is supposed to be absolute mental and physical purity. Unselfishness of purpose, universal charity, pity for all animate beings. 4, truthfulness and unswerving faith in the law of karma, which is independent of the intervention of any part in nature, a law whose course is not to be obstructed. 5, a courage which will be undaunted in every emergency, even at the risk of losing their life. 6 is an intuitive perception of one's being, of one's body, and being the vehicle of divine love. Avalokiteshvara is, of course, the Buddha, one of the Buddhas of compassion. He is depicted in the Buddhist cultures with hundreds and thousands of, I think 100 hands and 100 heads or something like that, in order to be able to be of service to humanity. So they have to be intuitively aware that they are instruments of service. And lastly, they have to have a calm indifference as an appreciation of everything of the physical world, but also that it's just a temporary thing, as we are actual beings of the spiritual world. Okay, so such at least are the recommendations to be the perfect chela, to be the perfect student, with the sole exception of the first quality, perfect physical health. The sole exception of the first of the quality, which is rare and in exceptional cases might have been modified, because each of these points have been invariably insisted upon, and all have been more or less developed in the inner nature of the chela's exertions. So if you look at it, point number 1 is a physical point, but all the others are inner points. Mental physical purity. Well, I assume physical purity here would mean taking a saltwater shower every day, or at least taking a bath every day. Because I can tell you from personal experience, I know of many, many spiritual people who will do a meditation and then say, I just did the meditation, I shall not shower for 24 hours, and they go to sleep. And they go off to sleep, and then when they wake up, they're like, I was in the inner world receiving instructions from the white Tara, the green Tara, the Ek Tara, and so on and so forth. So don't be lazy, do your thing, do your work. So taking this into account, we can again go back to the question in context that the person asked about the higher beings using bodies which are perfect in good health. But we're going to not answer that question just as yet. We're going to read some more and then circle back to it. So when the self-evolving student ascetic, whether in or outside the active world, when they've placed themselves according to their natural abilities and they've made themselves master. So basically the person, to simplify this language, they have to master four things. What? Their body, their senses, their faults, and their pain. So in India, in the Indian tradition, the body is the sharir, indriya are the senses, the doshas are the faults, and the dukkha are pain. Okay. So as Lord Buddha said, there is dukkha in life, but life itself is not dukkha. Okay. Pain is there, suffering is optional. So when they have mastered their body, their senses, their faults, and their pain, they're ready to become one with their mind, their spirit, their intelligence. Okay. When they're ready for this and to recognize in the spirit that it is spiritually, there is only oneness. So these qualities have to be ascertained. And that's the first set of qualifications. The second set of rules is given by Madame Blavatsky in her book, Practical Occultism. We'll probably study that later sometime. It's kind of complicated. There are 12 of these rules in number, but they're taken from a list of 73. Now, this 73 rules, they are applicable for, well, they're very occidental, very, very oriental. But the 12 rules, they are for people who are living in this present physical life. So, number one, the person has to take their instructions to reach their meditative state in a spot, in a location, which should not distract their mind and be filled with objects that evoke a positive psychological response. So the disciple has a certain space where they must have objects which evoke positive psychological response, and they must not be distracted. Okay. I suppose we could think of Zoom as such a place because we do sit and gather there at the same time. Now, they must have 5 sacred colors gathered in a circle, which should be there among many other things. And this place must be free from any malignant influences hanging about in the air. So basically, the aura of the room that they're in has to be purified. Okay. And this should ideally be like a meditation room, which should be used only for meditation and no other colors. And what are the 5 sacred colors? They are the prismatic hues arranged in a certain way because these colors are very magnetic. When you say malignant influences, these are meant by the disturbances which are caused through quarreling, bad feelings, stress, etc., because they immediately have an effect on the aura, on the astral and mental bodies, and the energy of the place. So the first condition is easy enough to accomplish, but if you really think about it, it's one of the most difficult to obtain, because how many of us can actually say that we have a room which is completely free of any form of strife? And based on some searching, the 5 colors which I thought would represent this would be the 5 colors that are shown in Buddhism, where you have blue, white, red, green, and yellow, or at least red, blue, yellow, and green are the 4 colors which are very commonly understood and very popular. And white is, of course, the combination of the 3 primary colors into forming white light. And they represent, of course, the elements of earth, air, fire, water, and space. And they represent the overcoming of anger and aversion, overcoming of jealousy, overcoming attachment, overcoming pride, and overcoming ignorance. And it's represented in Buddhism by the 5 Buddhas. There are many, many Buddhas, right? Okay, so it's not just that Shakyamuni Buddha or Lord Gautama Buddha was the only Buddha. Buddha is basically a title. It's given to, as far as my reading goes, someone who has utilized their buddhi meaning intellect. Someone who has used their intellect to reach enlightenment is called a Buddha. And all of us one day, according to the path of evolution that we are on, will become Buddhas, which means at one point we will become enlightened. Now, that's not going to happen today and tomorrow. It's unlikely to happen this year or next. It's likely to take several hundreds and thousands of incarnations, but it will eventually happen. And it's going to happen for each and every one of us, all 7.5 billion people on this planet. So the person who annoys you, who irritates you, and you think of them as a you foolish so-and-so and so, they too will one day become a Buddha. So it would be nice of us to not be unkind to them, to be nice and gentle to them, because someone else who is higher up in evolution to us might also be looking down at us and saying, you silly so-and-so and so. So yeah, there are, of course, all these other Buddhas, Ratnasambhava, Amitabha, Akshobhaya, Amoga Siddhi, and Vairochana. There are many chants. If you go onto YouTube and search for them, there are many, many chants for invoking that particular quality. So if for some reason you are possessed of the notion that you want to overcome attachment, then please search for Buddha Amitabha's chants. And it's very interesting that if you look up Tibetan tankas or Tibetan paintings, you'll find the Buddhas colored, their skin and bodies are colored with these same shades, red, blue, green, yellow, white, and so on and so on. That's qualification 1. Requirement number 2 is before the disciple shall be permitted to study face to face, they have to understand, they have to have a preliminary understanding in a group. And the number of people in the group must be an odd number. Okay. Why? That's not explained in this part so far, but it's just one of the requirements. Before the teacher shall give the disciple, and here the word lanu is given to the disciple, before the teacher gives the disciple the holy words from the holy books, from the good books, they have to ensure that the mind is thoroughly purified. Otherwise, the words of wisdom will be scattered. Now, these are very Tibetan terms, as you can read from the language. I'm not reading the exact language out, but you get the gist of it. In, I suppose, Christianity, it's the saying goes, thou shalt not cast pearls before swine. Okay, so would make for probably a very fetching looking pig, but nevertheless. Requirement number 4, the student while studying must take care to be united as the fingers on one hand. They need to be impressed upon their minds that what hurts one thing also hurts other things. And if the rejoicing of one finds no echo in the heart of the others, then the required conditions are absent, which means the law of oneness, basically. That if you take, let's simplify this. If you have a finger, take your finger and you cut the finger off, obviously, it's not just the finger that's going to suffer, the whole hand, and by extension, the whole body will suffer. So we usually think of people as separate from ourselves, that individual fingers represent individual people. But in actuality, we are all connected. And what hurts one being will hurt eventually all other beings. And that's why the law of karma is in place. The law of karma is there because the law of oneness is there. If there was no oneness, there would be no karma. Okay. That's requirement 4. Requirement 5 is the co-disciples must be tuned by the guru as the strings of an instrument, the flute, or in the Indian tradition, the veena. Each will be different from others, yet each emitting sounds in harmony with all. So like you've got do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If all of them sounded exactly the same, like do, you'd have a very loud do, but it won't have any melody because everything would sound the same. So you need to have some amount of difference. You've got to have your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And collectively, they must form a keyboard answering in all its parts the lightest touch of the master. Okay. And okay, I've got a question going here on in the group. Let's come to that in some time. Okay, to answer the question, there's only a sketch of Master Kutumi's house in the thing. So when we do these study sessions, the question that's asked is, where do the figures and pictures come from? Because in the actual book of Masters in the Path, there's only one sketch. The answer is, when we are preparing these books and these slides for you, we do a lot of research from and cross-references from other books of theosophy, which are there. And there's some diagrams which are available. We search on the theosophical portals, which are there. And many of the teachings are actually teachings which have been in the traditions, in the religions of the world for a very long time. And they're represented and drawn over there. So when we find any particular reference to something, it's not necessarily exactly from the book, but it's cross-referenced with many other study material so that we can develop, we can deliver a nice study experience for you. So it's not just all text and us reading, or in the case of me doing this now, singing to you. So I hope that helps. So anyhow, everyone must be in tune, in harmony with one another. Their mind shall be open for the harmonies of wisdom to vibrate as knowledge through each and every one of us, in effect, pleasing the higher beings. Requirement number 6, those who want to acquire occult powers, the siddhis, need to renounce all the vanities of life and the world. So the question is, what are the siddhis? Well, there are many of them. So as a person, they need to have the qualities of helping, contribution, simplicity, economy. They have to be searching, willful, responsibility, and so on. There are the qualities of them to be able to become small, not physically small, but they can enter, their consciousness can enter the smallest of spaces, atomic spaces. They have also the quality of becoming huge, massive, which means they'll be able to understand the quality of the entire universe. It's not that they physically become big, physically become small. The siddhis are not like, superpowers that you have at the physical level, but more of an energetic, mental kind of thing. Requirement number 7, they should not feel the difference between themselves and their fellow students. Now we have this, right? That I am the most energetic, I am the wisest, I am the most dynamic, the teacher favors me than anyone else. Those qualities are unacceptable. Their thoughts must be predominantly fixed upon the heart. Every negative thought form must be removed. And the heart must be full of the feeling of oneness from every person, every being. Number 8, the disciple has to fear external living influences, which means they have to stay separately. They have to free their physical body from foreign influence. He will have to have his own crockery, his own cutlery. Okay, they should not have relationships with other humans, other people. Now, this is kind of extreme. We'll explain that. No pet animals are permitted, and it is forbidden even to touch certain trees and plants. A disciple has to live, so to speak, in their own atmosphere. Okay. Requirement number 9 and 10, the mind must remain blunt to everything except the universal truth. No animal food, no meat, no flesh should be eaten. No wine, no spirits, no opium, because they cause negative energies to come to them. Requirements 11 and 12, meditation, abstinence, following moral duties, doing good thoughts, good deeds, good words, should be there all the time. And it's only by virtue of a strict observance of these rules that a student can hope in time to acquire the good qualities which the arhats have, and the growth of them which gradually makes him one with all. Now, the first set of rules calls for no comment. The first one, taking care of your mind, body, spirit, emotions, and desires, and all of that, because they're universal in their application, and they differ only in the form of their expression. But the second set of rules, these 12 rules, which we read out right now, it's obviously on a very different footing. It's very clearly formulated for Eastern students, and even among them, it's meant chiefly for those who are able to devote their whole lives to study, and they live separate from the world in a monastery. Because in regular life, in Western life, in your and mine day-to-day life, we have insisted so strongly upon individuality, that the right of each and every person is very personal, and we forget the oneness which we are supposed to share with all. Now, it might be supposed to these requirements that rule number 8, what was rule number 8? Has to dread external living conditions. They must live separately, no pet animals, you can't touch certain plants. Now, it might be supposed that these come into inconsistency with rule 8, in which the chela is instructed to avoid contact. So on the one hand, you're not allowed to contact or touch anything. On the other hand, you're one with all. How does that work? Now, the avoidance of unnecessary contact with others has its advantages, because the aura, the energy of the auras, they don't intermingle. In the leisurely style of life of India in the old days, we're talking several hundreds of years ago, it was easy to escape uncomfortable contamination of the aura. But nowadays, not so easy. We can, however, readily and effectively protect ourselves against undesirable energies by forming around our bodies a shell or a shield, which will exclude it. I've got this Dr. Strange kind of diagram going on. Such a shell may be of etheric, astral, or mental matter according to the purpose for which it is required. And a description of the various kinds of shells and the way to make them is given in the book, The Hidden Side of Things, which we'll probably touch upon in some time. It also includes beautiful stories of certain monks showing that the best way to protect yourself from evil influence than creating a shield is to fill your hearts with divine love. Okay, there's actually a story here. I'll digress a little bit. There was a story of an Egyptian, what's the word for the Egyptian priest, the Egyptian high priest? So anyway, the Egyptian high priest, he was about to retire. He knew his end was near. And there were two of his top disciples, and he was not sure whom he would pass on the title to. So he gave them a chance to prove themselves, right? And both of them, very good people, very powerful people, he was observing them doing their work. At the end of the day, he observed the quality of their auras. He didn't bother looking at the physical appearances. He looked at the energies and qualities of their aura. One student he found, both students actually he found, their auras were absolutely clean and clear. One student, however, had created around him a shield, an emotional, a mental, an etheric shield. And therefore, his aura was protected from the negative influences of other people. The other student, however, had no shield, but what he did have was an enormously activated heart. His heart chakra was so active, so filled with divine love, that that divine love acted as a natural shield and repelled all the negative energies which were being attracted. So like energies attract, by creating an aura of the opposite energy, you will protect yourself from being stressed, from being anxious, from being angry, etc., etc. So the priest eventually gave the title to the student who radiated this love and who did not find it necessary to shield himself in order to protect himself from the negative influences of others. In one of the courses of pranic healing, there's this course called Practical Psychic Self-Defense for Home and Office by Master Choa Kok Sui, where he teaches us how to create etheric, astral, mental, and spiritual shields. And it's fascinating. We learn how to create etheric gloves and socks and shield others and protect things. We've done this ourselves. I remember one time when we were traveling, and I had a connecting flight from Malaysia to Thailand, and from Thailand back to India. I made it to the flight, but my luggage didn't. And on that particular flight, for some reason, there were hundreds of articles of luggage which had gone missing and stayed missing. So I created a shield around my luggage. And I remember creating a cord, like you have these energy cords. I created a cord with myself and my luggage and kept pulling at the cord. And I remember that usually when we are called for lost and found luggage, we have to go to the airport, to the airline office and identify our luggage from a lineup, prove that it's ours, and then take it back. In my case, I remember the airline company called me, asked me if I was going to be at home at a certain date, a certain time, the very next day, and they came home and hand delivered the luggage. So yeah, not only does shielding work, not only does the creation of cords and these things work, it has enormous practical applications. So I hope you're enjoying these practical application side of things, not just keeping it theoretical. Now, anyway, the next part about the student not being allowed to keep pets and stuff. The regulation against keeping pet animal leaves out of account the fact that it's only through association with human beings that these creatures can be individualized. Certain animals have a rudimentary mental body. Like for example, your pet dogs, if you have a pet dog, it'll take certain orders. Sit, stay, don't eat. Well, that doesn't work, but still. And it's when they spend more time with us, like I have pets at home. And when we were at home for the last 2.5 years in lockdown, and we spend more time with the dogs, I've actually noticed an increase in their intelligence levels. They understand. It's almost as if they understand human conversation. Of course, they can't speak, but they understand, they follow. Previously, before the lockdown, we'd be leaving our homes to go to a place of work and coming back to these animals and spending some time with them the rest of the day, the rest of the evening, and then at night when we were asleep. But by associating with them, spending that much time with them, it's almost as if they also accelerated their evolution. So therefore, in that context, it appears to consider only the possibility that the disciple may allow himself to be adversely affected by the animal. And it altogether forgets the beneficent influence which the disciple may intentionally bring to bear upon the younger soul. But quite possibly in the remote ages in which these rules were formed, there were no animals sufficiently developed to be approaching individualization, right? So to say that you should not have pets, you should completely stay alone, is something which was probably applicable several thousands of years ago, but now we can give that a pass. And I know there are certain books where this is really emphasized upon. Use your discernment, use your discretion. Okay. In fact, in the writing about the progress of the student, there are again many teachings which say that you should not get married, that you cannot have both spirituality and a partner. Okay. It's apparently not allowed. That's why there are many people who are single, who are celibate. Now, while it is true that the single person is in certain ways freer, as for example, they can just leave everything and they start and take up work in some foreign country, which they could hardly do, which they could not do if they have the responsibility of a spouse and a family and work. It must not be forgotten that the married couple has the opportunity of serving the cause, serving the spiritual path in a very different way. Because when they're married and they have kids, those kids are suitable vehicles and they create favorable surroundings for the many advanced egos who are waiting to descend into incarnation. So both types of work are needed, and there is room among the ranks of the disciples for both married and single. And the body might be working out certain types of karma. The body of the soul, the soul that is using that particular body can have certain types of karma to work out, but the soul itself can be quite advanced. So it's not necessary that the higher beings would use only perfect, fully healthy vehicles for conducting their work. They could well be using the bodies of those who are developmentally, physically, mentally challenged in certain ways in order to further the work. That said, there's actually another story. Many of you may be familiar with the story of one particular king. There was a story of a king who was a great giver, a great donor. He would never accept anything. He would always give. Okay. And this king was incarnated later into a body that was completely a vegetable. I'm sorry if that's politically incorrect, but this child, this reincarnated king, this child now had no ability to feed itself, to clothe itself, to even go to the toilet. It was completely dependent upon its parents for doing everything. So the parents, they were nice and spiritual people, and they're wondering, what karma do I have? I'm a spiritual person, I'm a nice person. What karma do we have that we have brought a child into this world who is a complete quadriplegic, who is completely physically and mentally, developmentally stunted? And so they were brought to the attention of a clairvoyant, a very powerful clairvoyant person. I think this was in the Philippines. And the clairvoyant person observed and said, okay, so this person was a king and he gave and gave and gave and gave, and he did not allow himself to receive. So in this lifetime, because he has so much karma to receive, that he is receiving everything from the food to the clothes to being taken care of in every single way, every single day. So how karma works is hard to say. Whether it's a result of tremendous good karma or the result of tremendous negative karma is extremely hard to say. But it happens, and they all have their use for it, they have their work for it. Sometimes the high beings come in order to teach us certain lessons. So at this point in time, the student, hopefully you and me, we should have no doubt as to what we should be doing. We should obviously be making efforts along two particular lines, which is the development of our own character and the undertaking of definite work for others. Now, clearly, what is said before us in this teaching implies an altogether different attitude towards life in general. And that has been expressed by one of the masters in the phrase, "They who wish to work for us and for us must leave their own world and come into ours." This does not mean, as one might usually understand, that the student must abandon the ordinary world of physical life and business and retire to the jungle or to the cave or to the mountain. It does mean they must abandon the attitude, the worldly attitude of the mind, and instead take on the attitude of the master. And I'll tell you from personal experience, if you're going to leave the physical world and go on and meditate in the mountains, carry with you mosquito repellent, because those buggers are powerful. So you can't just go onto the mountains and meditate, they're going to bite you. So anyway, the question that sometimes is asked is, we're supposed to be working on our own development, sure, and the undertaking of definite work for others. So what work should we do? The answer is that all good work is the master's work. In addition, some of the pupils' activity must consist in preparing themselves for greater responsibility in the future. The duties of common life often combine something of both these things, because they provide a very good training and education for those who do them properly. And they offer many occasions for helping other people to progress in their character, in their ideals, which is most emphatically the master's business. So basically, do good in the name of the master, because the master's work is not something peculiar and different from our fellow people. To raise a good family who will serve him in turn, to make money, to use it in his service, to win power, to help him with it, all these may be a part of it. Now I'm going to take a gap over here and tell you another story. I seem to be in story sharing mode today. Some weeks ago, a particular client of mine invited me to his ancestral property, some 350 kilometers away from the city. It's a large place, okay, on several acres of land, massive building, quite a few hundred years old. And to enter the building, to enter this massive plot of property, we had to enter through the gates of a temple first. Okay, and in that temple, they had an image of Lord Shiva. So in India, it's pretty common that you have something called a Shiva Lingam, which is like a stone, which is supposed to represent the energy of Lord Shiva. And so this client of mine, he's in his 60s. He's a very powerful, he's an industrialist, okay? And he walks in and he looks at me in his deep voice and says, "Please take your shoes off and we will pray before we enter the house." And you have that sense that when you're in the presence of certain energy, of a large space, there's a sense of quietude, quietness that comes in. And I walked in and I paid my respects. And as I was putting my shoes back on, the client, he said, "We are the stewards of the house. The house belongs to the deity. It is because we do service that we are allowed to live in this house." And that really struck me. That it's because that we are doing service that we are allowed here, say I personally am allowed here to do service to help you disseminate the book. I don't have an inherent understanding and knowledge of things. I'm reading too. I'm learning and researching too. I'm just maybe a couple of chapters ahead. So it's because that I am doing service that I am allowed to have what I have. So if we have a family, the family will help the rest of humanity. If we have money, we should have the wisdom to use that money for spreading the work. To have power is to help and influence other people to have a good life. Yet in doing these things, the disciple must always be on guard against self-deception. They must see that they're not fooling themselves with the holiness of the master's name, while underneath it, there's a selfish desire to wield power or money. The disciple of the master has to look around and see what there is to do within his power. He must not look upon humblest tasks and say, "I'm too good for this." In the master's business, no part is more important than any other part. Some parts are more difficult and therefore require special training or unusual faculties or abilities. But every bit of work is important. And according to Madame Blavatsky, she told us that whenever a person joined the outer Theosophical Society, the Holy Master looked at that person. And furthermore, in many cases, the great ones, they guided people to join the society because of the work and the karma of their previous lives. So it would seem that the higher beings usually know a great deal about us before we know anything about them. We are learning about Masters Kutumi and Master Mordia and the Venetian and all now, but chances are they already knew about it and said, okay, you people, come on in, work is to be done. So the masters always appear to be in full possession of all the facts that have happened. And even if they look at a person very casually, they will never forget or overlook that person. And when a person joins the inner school, a definite link is not yet formed with an adept, but first with the outer head of the school, and through them to the master, who is the inner head. And this will come on next chapter when we do this the next day, is how the higher beings look at us, how they observe us. Okay. And according to Bishop Leadbeater, he recalls an incident where he knew a man of great knowledge and of great character who thoroughly believed the existence of the masters. And he was so suited for discipleship, so better than himself in so many ways, that Bishop Leadbeater could not understand why this guy was not already recognized and accepted in the work. And so he was young, he was fresh. He mentioned his name to the master with the suggestion that this guy might be a good instrument. And the master very kindly smiled and said, you need not fear that your friend is being overlooked, because no one can ever be overlooked. But in this case, there still remains a certain karma to be worked out, which makes it impossible at the moment to accept your suggestion. Because soon your friend will pass away from the physical plane, and soon he'll return to it again. And there, the work will be complete, the karma will have been worked out, and then what you desire is for him to be of service will become possible. So our job is to go from the highest of the planes, as you can see, this is complete emptiness, to something, 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 to complete matter. And then we go back ascending into spirit. So we have reached this stage already, and now we are on the journey up. And then this holy master, with the gentle kindness, which is so prominent, which is so part of their character, he took Bishop Leadbeater's consciousness with his in a very intimate manner, just connected them together, and raised his consciousness to a plane far higher than what Bishop Leadbeater himself could reach at that point. And from that elevation, he showed him how the great ones look out upon the world. The whole world lay before them with their billions of souls, undeveloped, most of them undeveloped, and therefore oblivious to what the work was. But wherever there was, in that great magnitude, there was one person who was even close to reaching that point, their attention stood out, just as the flame of a lighthouse stands out in the darkness of the night. So you might consider this. Have you ever been to the mountains? If you've ever been to the mountains on the road and night has fallen, it becomes night very quickly in the mountains. The sun just goes beyond one hill and it's complete darkness. And the lights in those villages, in the cities, on the mountains, they start to come up. And amidst that great blackness, you see these points of light springing up. That is how the holy beings, the higher beings, look at us. That in the vast darkness, our spiritual light is like the light of a tiny flame in the darkness. And that's what we are supposed to be aspiring towards. Now, another quality very essential for the aspirant is to be open-minded and free from any bigotry of any sort. And Madame Blavatsky told us that the masters had remarked that erroneous beliefs were sometimes a great obstacle. For example, there were thousands of Indian sannyasis, monks, who were leading the purest lives and were ready for discipleship, except for the fact that they had certain preconceived and prejudiced ideas, inaccurate perception on certain matters, which made it impossible for even the masters to penetrate their auras. Such thoughts created undesirable energies around them, unpleasant influences which acted on them and intensified their misconceptions, so that until they developed their own reasoning and rationale, they were impervious to suggestion. Remember that also everyone who meditates upon the master makes a definite connection with himself, which shows itself to clairvoyance as a line of light. The master always subconsciously feels the line and sends out a response in return. The methodical practice of meditation and concentration is thus of utmost help to the aspirant, and regularly doing it is one of the most important factors in producing the result. It should be undertaken daily at the same hour, and we should steadily persevere with it even though no obvious effect may be produced. People often wrote letters to the Theosophical Society and say, why does the master not use me? I'm so earnest, I'm so devoted, I so want to be used. Take me, teach me, why doesn't he do so? And there may be reasons, many reasons why that does not happen. Sometimes a person asking that has some fault, which in itself is a sufficient reason. And usually that fault is pride. A person is so well conceited of himself that they are not amenable to teaching, even though they think they are. I am a spiritual person. I am a developed person. Why is the Holy Master not using me? I am approved for the next higher level. Why am I not being approved for the higher level? All that kind of stuff. Now, very often in our lifestyle, one major fault is irritability. A good person, a worthy person may have their nerves so jingled and jangled up that would be impossible for us to draw into close contact with the masters. Sometimes we are over curious, not curious about life and other things, but gossip, curious about the affairs of other people. So gossiping, not allowed if you want to go on the spiritual path. Pride, not allowed. Irritability, nah. Another common hindrance is the readiness to be offended. We are so ready to be upset. Many a good and earnest aspirant is so easily offended as to be practically useless in the work because they cannot get along with other people. This was an issue which I had. he will have to probably still do. He'll have to wait and learn to adapt themselves and to cooperate with other persons. Now, many people, they don't like it if their faults are pointed out to them. They don't believe that they have it. Okay. In many cases, they ask, what's the matter with me? Why can't I go nearer to the teacher? And then when the teacher tells them that, okay, you know what, you really, there's too much ego in your aura, you're thinking about only yourself and not enough about the work. And of course, these people tend to be very offended. But if they're genuinely good, they'll come back after some time, maybe a few weeks, few months, few years, and they'll say, you know what you told me was true. And I'm going to put it right and I'm going to work hard at it. Except that it's kind of a rare thing. Okay. They don't like when their faults are pointed out to them. So one of the masters once remarked that the first duty of the chela, of the aspirant, is to hear without anger anything that the guru might say. He should be eager to change himself, to get rid of his faults. And Madame Blavatsky remarked that chelaship has been defined by a master as a psychic solvent, like a psychic acid, which eats away all the dross and leaves only the pure gold behind. The astral and mental bodies of an aspirant ought to be continuously exhibiting 4 or 5 big glowing emotions: love, devotion, sympathy, and intellectual aspiration. But instead of a few great feelings vibrating splendidly and clearly with fine color, one usually sees the astral body spotted over with red and brown and gray and black vortices, often hundreds or more. These are somewhat like the mass of warts on a physical body. Now, we don't want to hold ourselves back. We want to give our energies to them. We want to give love, devotion, sympathy, and intellectual aspiration. We don't want to be thinking selfish and angry thoughts. Many people, when they're trying to go onto the spiritual path, they have a tendency to say, I will follow the master as long as he wants me to do this work. As long as the master does not want me to work with XYZ, I'll follow the master. And I need to be mentioned and recognized in the papers and the blogs and stuff like that. We should not make conditions. We don't have to give up our physical world. We don't have to give up our job, our home and family and stuff, but we should be ready to do the work. We must be prepared to do anything, to go anywhere, not as a test, but because the love of the work is the biggest thing in our lives. So sometimes people ask, if I do all of these things, how long will it be before the master takes me on probation and accepts me? There will be no delay, but there is much virtue in the word if. Like, if I do all these things, it's not easy to do them perfectly. And if it was required that we have to do everything perfectly, it would be a very long time before we could hope for discipleship. So one of the masters has said, he who does his best does enough for us. And with that, we come to a conclusion of chapter 3 and go on to chapter 4, which will be the next day. We'll try and merge some of the chapters together because otherwise this book will go on for the rest of the year. And we'll try and complete this book in this month of April. So thank you so much for joining in for chapter 3 of Masters of the Path on the pupil. We will be doing next week, chapter 4, probation. I hope we've answered your questions and it's been of some satisfaction. If you have any questions, we are available on chat, in the group, and in direct messages. Thank you so much for joining in. Have a great rest of the week. Atma Namaste.